Hello, this is Nicholas Tanek with your Kinky Friends, and wow, do I have a unique guest with me today, 2022. Um, we're going to talk about eroticism. We're going to talk about the erotic blueprints. We're going to, and of course, oh my God, we're going to talk about poetry, slam poetry, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And we're going to talk about Colorado. Colorado, please welcome the wonderful, the magnificent Cortney Collins. Say hi.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. So, um, what's going on? How you been?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know. I don't know if you're a believer in and or follow astrology at all. But I'm really into astrology, and we just had this big, spectacular lunar eclipse in Scorpio, coupled with a Mercury retrograde, and so I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it. Um,
I'm a
yeah, it's been
Leo.
an intense time.
I'm a Leo myself. My friend Luna, um, my friend Luna is very big into it, and like she made my chart. She did all
Oh, wow.
this stuff. She's like, you're in the house of this and stuff. I have no idea what the hell she's talking about.
Right?
All I
Yeah.
know is that she says this. She goes, "You're such a Leo." Like she says that all the time. You're such a Leo.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
you're such a Leo. You're such okay. I'll
When's your
take it. I
birthday?
am.
I'm right on the cusp of Leo.
Oh yeah. I'm
Yeah.
August 21st.
21st?
Yes, I'm right on the cusp too. I think.
You are right on the cusp. I'm August 24th.
Okay, interesting.
Is
Well,
my
let's talk about astrology and sex, basically.
Mhm.
Um, how do you think that comes into play? How do you think? First of all, how do you, in general, how do you think that comes into play?
Ooh, well, I have had my chart done, and I have my heaviest house is the eighth house. I have like massive planets in the eighth house. And the eighth house is ruled as I understand it. I mean, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but as I understand it, the eighth house is ruled by Pluto and Scorpio. And I think people who know even a little bit about astrology know that like Scorpio is the sex sign. Like Scorpio is a sexual sign. But anyways, the eighth house is ruled by Pluto and Scorpio. It's the house of sex, secrets, power, transformation, death. There are people, as I understand it, in Vedic astrology who believe that the eighth house can tell you how and when you will die. Um, I don't want to know, I don't want to know. But yeah, so I mean, I'm not at all surprised based on my eighth house that I ended up kind of working for a company that deals with eroticism and sexuality. Um it's like I can see now where my whole life was kind of leading me here. But to answer your question more directly, yeah, I don't know. I guess as much as I'm into astrology, I hadn't thought about how it impacts sexuality specifically. Um, but I know I went to a workshop. One of our coaches in our community, an erotic blueprint coach, knows a lot about the Enneagram. Are you familiar with the Enneagram at all?
I'm familiar with erotic blueprints,
Okay.
but what is? Please tell us.
Yeah, the Enneagram is
Five.
supposedly a really ancient personality test. So there are 9 types.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so anyways, one of our coaches in our community is not only a certified erotic blueprint coach, but he is like in the know about the Enneagram. So I attended a workshop of his once where he talked about the interplay of sexuality in the Enneagram numbers. Um, and kind of wove a little bit about the blueprints into it. And it was just really, really interesting. So Yeah, I think there are all kinds of fascinating ways that all of that stuff can interact.
And Sandy says, "Hello, Goddess Cortney."
Hi, Sandy.
And then Krishma Priya asks, "Thank you. 1:45 a.m. in India."
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow,
Definitely.
that's awesome.
So, okay, let's talk about. I talked to Amanda Rose, who
Oh yeah.
is we had a great conversation yesterday about erotic blueprints. For those who didn't watch that episode,
Mhm.
please tell us the erotic blueprints. I believe there's 5 of them.
There are 5. So the 5 erotic blueprints are the energetic, the sensual, the sexual, the kinky, and the shapeshifter. Those are the 5 erotic blueprint types.
Okay, and out of those 5, which do you feel that you personally fall under?
I am an energetic shapeshifter. So energetic is my primary type, and shapeshifter would be my secondary type. So I just think of myself as an energetic shapeshifter.
Okay, I was I was told by Amanda that I'm more of the kinky shapeshifter type, which
Okay.
I'll take.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll take.
That's really yummy.
But no, wait. She goes, but it also think she also feels that I'm a sensual, because I have a deep love of the music and
Yeah.
touch and stuff like
Yeah.
that. We were talking about how just a song or lighting like can
Yeah.
really change the whole experience. You know what I mean? But I
Yeah,
was
absolutely. Yeah.
okay. So okay, we got the erotic blueprints, and how can someone kind of evolve into becoming a shapeshifter? Because I was told by Amanda was talking about how you know it's the shapeshifter is almost the ultimate lover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, oh, and then Sandy says, "I'm into kinky."
Right on. Right on. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, okay, so how can someone like kind of evolve into becoming a shapeshifter? And keep in mind, let me for anyone watching this, this is not religious. This is
Mhm.
not like a cult. This is more of a kind of like just this. What would you say? How would you describe it? It's more of a kind of just like a
It's just a oh gosh, there's so many ways to describe it. Probably the most basic way is just a framework.
yeah.
It's
Okay.
framework. It's just a framework to understand your unique map of arousal a little better. Yeah,
Yeah.
or a lot better.
And it's important to understand yourself. So, I mean, if you're going to be a lover in any way, shape, or form, if you're going to, especially in the kink community, BDSM community, to know yourself
Yes.
and, so you could help other people and get to know other people as well.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah.
so how can someone, you know, kind of get into that kind of shapeshifter um, level of the blueprint?
Well, I guess there's a couple things I would say to that. Jaya, I've heard Jaya say a few times, we all already are shapeshifters. Well, we all already are shapeshifters at our core, but um, it's so much of it has been suppressed under layers and layers and layers and layers of cultural conditioning. It gets conditioned out of us, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I've heard her say that a few times. Like, we already are shapeshifters. Um, it's just a matter of like dismantling all this conditioning we get in our cultural around eroticism and sexuality. But the thing I personally would say about it is this is a little bit of a counterintuitive answer, but don't worry about becoming a shapeshifter. Because my feeling is, first of all, like Jaya says, you already are at the core of it. But I think it's so important to honor whatever wants to express right where we're at. And if whatever is wanting to express in us erotically is energetic, awesome. You know, if it's kinky, awesome. Sexual, sensual, like whatever wants to come through organically at that moment, just follow that. It's like I feel like those are the breadcrumbs, like just what wants to be expressed. Just listen to that and really just like honor right where you're at. Like there's no rush or pressure to be a shapeshifter, in my
Okay,
opinion.
great.
Does
No,
that
that's a
answer
good.
the
That's
question?
definitely without a doubt. So, how did you meet Jaya?
Well, I first came into the Blueprint Breakthrough world in 2019. Um, I was invited by a friend who had a complimentary ticket to 2019's Path to Passion event, which is one of our big yearly events. And you know, she had this free ticket. This friend of mine had been trying to get me to come to Path to Passion for years. But I had all these perceptions about it. I was like, oh, that's going to be weird sex shit. It's going to be esoteric. It's going to be too advanced for me. I'm going to be triggered, you know, all these things. And finally, there was a Path to Passion in 2019, very close to where I live in Colorado. And I was like, oh, I'm running out of excuses not to go. So I went, and I would say within the first hour that I walked in the door of that event, I said to myself, this is the work the world needs. This is the work the world needs. And you know, a couple months later, or not a couple, maybe about 6 months later, I ended up being hired to be a part of their team.
That's
So
awesome. Now, what would you recommend? Because there are a lot of people out there who are repressed or feel so much shame to express their kinks. Like they may have a kink that, or a fetish, like just for a foot fetish or something like that.
mhm,
And you have some people who want to, like men who want to wear women's clothing,
mhm.
or women who get turned on by, wearing men's clothing, or
Yeah.
experimenting with gender, or so to speak, or becoming gender fluid. And
Mhm.
there's like this kind of repressed shame involved. A lot of it, in my opinion, has to do with religion and the culture, but that's a whole other story.
Right, right, right.
So for someone who feels that way, who's in a, basically, and it could be anywhere around the world, it seems like every country has this kind of repression that's going
Mhm.
on, in some level.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them, to someone who has these urges, who has these kinks, who has these fetishes, that are basically scared to kind of live them out?
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. I don't know if Amanda Rose talked about this at all when you spoke with her. Was it yesterday you said?
Yeah, it was yesterday around this time.
Yeah, yesterday. Okay. So the Kinky Blueprint, this is actually a big part of the shadow of the Kinky Blueprint, is the shame. Like why does this turn me on? Like it could almost be like, or sometimes be, what's wrong with me that this turns me on, or that I'm excited by this. Um I think one thing that's really moved the needle for me around shame is just consciously trying to make a shift from judgment of myself, judgment of others, to just curiosity. That has been a game changer in my life. If I can just cultivate curiosity, like, oh, well, what is this? Let's just get curious about this. Like, what? I wouldn't even say what's this about, because it makes it sound pathological. It's just like, what wants to be expressed here? Like, do I want to express this fantasy, or is it better left as a fantasy? Like, once you can get, like, you can move from judgment to curiosity, it just opens up a world of questions. Um, yeah. So I would say that's been a big needle mover for me.
Okay, definitely. Let's talk about poetry.
Yeah.
So you are tell us about your life in poems and your life in poetry.
Mm,
Let's just start off with that.
yeah. So I became, like so many writers, and you mentioned before we went live, you're a writer, so that this may be your experience as well. But so many of us have just been spontaneously writing since childhood.
Hmm.
It's just like we just got to do it. So I've really been writing poetry my whole life. But I didn't get serious about it, like really, really serious about the craft um, until about 6 years ago. And it was the weirdest thing. I was scrolling through Facebook, and you know how Facebook, you feel like Facebook is spying on you or something with some
Oh
of the
yeah, the algorithm especially. Yeah.
algorithm, exactly. And for some reason, I was living in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time, and all of a sudden, my Facebook feed plopped this poetry slam tonight at the Joyo Theater in Havelock, which is a section of the city of Lincoln. And something in me just went, oh, I want to go to that. I should go to that. And I did, and I was bitten by the bug after that.
Okay, so what would you say hmm, makes poetry sexy?
Oh my God, so sexy. Oh, poetry is so sexy. I think for me, one thing that makes poetry sexy is poetry is coming from a really, not always, but often coming from a really instinctual, intuitive, um, you think about, like, I used to have this recurring dream that I was falling into a hole. And once I fell into the hole, I would journey through this magical world with dangers and perils and enchantment and beauty. And in the dreams, I would just fall into the hole over and over because I just wanted to take the journey over and over and everything that went with it. And when I think of poetry, I think of that underworld. I just think of that underworld of instinct and like the senses. That is one thing for sensual people, sensual blueprints. The way poetry can speak to your senses. You might hear a sound reading or listening to a poem. You might feel the temperature of water in the South Pacific in a poem. You might feel that water on your skin and it's sensual. Um, yeah, so I think poetry can speak to our eroticism in so many ways, in every blueprint, in every single blueprint.
Definitely. Okay. So who would you say your influences are when it comes to not just poetry but writing in general?
Yeah, I have to honestly say my biggest influences um have been the people who get deep and raw and candid and painful and transcendent and real on the poetry slam scenes I've been
Mhm.
on. I mean, the way I see people peel off the societal mask and just rip out their hearts and show them to us. Those people are my influences, and none of them are famous.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And what's
Yeah.
I find interesting is because I've been a part of coffee houses since high school. Going to college coffee houses while I was in high school, stuff like that. And I always found a certain aspects to be of poetry, which don't get me wrong, I'm saying this right now. I love poetry. I really do.
Mhm.
there is a huge, at the same time, I acknowledge the pretentiousness of it, you know,
Totally.
and
Totally.
I totally acknowledge the humor of it. I have a book called Your Kinky Friends, which
Mhm.
is basically after Lynn died. I was devastated, didn't know what to do. And it's about the BDSM culture and my friends in the kink community who really, truly saved my life and
Mhm.
kind of influenced me to express myself. And there's a flashback in it with a friend of mine named Randy, and she, um, we're both coked up out of our minds in the scene, you know, and we go to a coffee house, and there's this guy who is basically inhabiting this kind of dom persona, this
Mhm.
male. Think of a college student dom, you know, who wants it really is just writing and reciting poetry to get laid. Come on, you know, it's you know, and
Yeah.
he's like, and then I made her go on the bed, and then you know she spread her legs on the bed, and then she looked at me
Mhm.
while she was on the bed, and then, you know, you're just like okay, we get it, you know, you know, and
Yeah.
so how would you find and it's weird because it's I I don't necessarily like insult humor or mean spirited humor, but sometimes it's really funny to kind of poke fun at yourself and the medium that you are making your own art in. So where do you think humor comes into poetry?
Well, for me, the biggest way humor comes into poetry is I gotta be able to laugh at myself and
Hmm.
the pretentiousness of it. The pretentious,
Yeah.
like, I have a certain amount, in fact, I have a whole performance poem called, I am the sort of person. And every stanza starts with, I am the sort of person. And it just goes through my foibles and my flaws and just the stupid shit I do and say and get myself into that cracks me up. But the last stanza in that poem, it's so funny you said what you said, because the last stanza in that poem is, I am the sort of person who doesn't take herself too seriously, although the fact that I write poetry might make you think otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So okay, let me tell you a story. So my my dom, my girlfriend, who also is essential to editing the 3 books I wrote, you
Mhm.
know, and she's a writer herself, stuff like that. And honestly, she'll tell you straight up. She goes, "I hate poetry." Right. So, but
Yeah.
and I grew up reading, you know, Byron and stuff like that, you know, and
Oh,
E. Cummings and you know, like I always had a love because I have a love for words. I have a
yeah,
love for, you know,
sure.
and so this whole thing started when we didn't have much money, right?
Mm,
And it was Valentine's Day, and this is the first poem I wrote to her,
okay.
and it's called Melissa, Happy Valentine's Day. And I
Hmm.
wrote it and I framed it and everything like that. This is the whole poem.
Awesome.
I was going to write you a poem for Valentine's Day, but then I remembered you hated poetry. That's it. So,
Oh, that's great.
so no, no, but it goes on and on and on. So it's like, you know, Christmas comes around and it's like, I was going to write you a poem for Christmas, but then I remembered you hated poetry, you know, and then I had a liver transplant,
Yeah.
you know, so I got, you know, and I'm recovering and I couldn't buy her anything for, you know, for her birthday, you know,
Mhm.
because I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the energy, literally didn't have the energy to go on the phone and order something from Amazon. But you know what? I had a pen and I could scribble something barely on a piece of
Yeah.
paper. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I was gonna write you a poem for your birthday, but then I had a liver transplant, and you hate poetry anyway.
Yeah. May I ask, what is it she hates about poetry? Have you
I
had
just,
that
I
conversation?
personally think she hates it's weird because she loves hip hop music. Um,
Okay. Okay.
and it's only been recently after because she's um you know she's been diagnosed with being bipolar,
Okay.
and she's dealing with manic situations, and she
Mm.
realizes now that hip hop culture, which is basically poetry, when
Yeah.
the MC gets
Yeah.
on a mic and starts rhyming, it's basically poetry,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
she finds something into it, and she can connect with it. So I don't know, slowly and surely, things will change. Christian Girl 24 says, "Hey Courtney, you are so amazing and you're so beautiful."
Oh, thank you, Christian girl. That's really sweet.
That's Erin.
Thank
She set this up actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Aaron.
I love Erin. Okay, so we talked about humor. Now what's magpies? Magpies is a zoem,
Yeah,
anthology.
Zolan was the pandemic era virtual poetry open mic I ran for 2 years.
Okay.
And I nicknamed it Zoem, for Zoom and poem, a little hybrid word there. And it stuck. And we do not know who coined the term magpies for us. We cannot figure we cannot figure out the origin of that nickname. But
Well, in
whoever
literature, there's a whole mythology about magpies.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I mean, yeah, somebody called us magpies one night and it stuck, and we refer, our little community, we referred to ourselves as the magpies for about 2 years. So that's why the book is called Zoem, or Magpies, a Zoem anthology.
Well, as an author, and it's funny is because I was lumped in when I wrote The Coolest Way to Kill Yourself, which is a love story. It's not a romance novel, it's a love story, which I like. It's a
Mhm.
true love story. It's 100% true. I'm not
Yeah,
good at writing fiction. I write nonfiction. Sometimes I
yeah.
just change the name for legal reasons.
Yeah,
um,
sure.
yeah, but I was kind of lumped in with 50 Shades of Grey
Mm.
and erotic authors and stuff like that. So when it comes to eroticism in literature, in anything you read, whether it's poetry or books or anything like that, there's always the horrible terms for genitalia. All right. So think about this. And these are actual, I'm not saying who, I'm not, like I said, I don't mean to be mean spirited. I don't, but these are actual things that I have read in text
Mhm.
from books that people have, all right. Turgid shaft.
Oh dear.
Then there's
I
sacred vagina.
shouldn't laugh because you know what? I shouldn't laugh because that turns somebody on somewhere, you know? Like I don't want to yuck anybody's yum,
But,
right?
laugh it up. Laugh it up. So there's, so then there's, all right, there's, um, and when you're brainstorming, I have to admit, I'm guilty of this when I'm, just getting the shit out on paper and then I'm
Mhm.
like, I'll edit it later. I've used the term sacred vagina,
Yeah, yeah.
which is not the sexiest type, you know.
Mm.
But yet, then again, I'm not writing to turn people on. I'm writing to just express myself and to tell a story, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. But then, there's this one. There's moist crevice.
Mm. Well, I most people have issues with the word moist anyhow.
Yeah, I know, right?
Moist is a real triggery word for a lot of people.
So, I mean, just at anything off the top of your head, and trust me, I'm not going to hold you to it, but like, is there anything off the top of your head that like really came across that you were reading or that you've heard in a movie or something like that where you're like, how can you describe that as this? You know what I mean?
Mm. Not really. I think a lot. First of all, I will say, I think erotic writing, particularly, yeah, maybe, erotic poetry is one of the easiest things to botch. I mean, it is one of the easiest things to botch because it is so remarkably easy to write cringeworthy erotic poetry. I think it is so difficult to write erotic well. Um, that said, I I don't know that there's any particular words or names for genitalia that bother me, but I think what bothers me in erotic writing is when I can sense in my body that it's inauthentic. And
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's what bothers me when it
That's
feels
what
like, yeah, I
that's what
mean, when it
really
feels
pissed
like,
me.
oh,
That's
go
what
ahead,
really
go ahead.
that's what really pissed me off about um like, so when The Coolest Way to Kill Yourself came out, it's not an erotic love story. It's a love story and it deals with eroticism and sexual expression.
Mhm.
That I'll totally I'm about that. Trust me. It deals with my lingerie fetish. It deals
Mhm.
with femdom and everything like that. More towards the third chapter or the third act of the book.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it was kind of marketed by my publishing company as romance. So I was like shoved in with the 50 Shades of Grey wannabe people.
Yeah.
So many. This drove me crazy. Is the fact that I'm part of the BDSM community. Like I'm
Yeah.
like I hold this culture, the BDSM culture, really close to my heart.
Mhm.
And seeing these people just trying to make money off of just trying to be the next Christian Grey, which
Yeah.
you don't want to be the next Christian Grey. I mean,
Yeah.
I,
Right?
it's I know people who are hardcore in the fetish community, both doms and subs, who are like, this is garbage. This does not represent the community. And
Yeah.
that's what inspired me to write a book called Your Kinky Friends, which really I mean what my goal was to represent the kink community and the BDSM community and sexual expression in a not only the right way, but a realistic way. You
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
we're not all billionaires.
Yeah.
We're not, you know what I mean? Some of us are poor. All of us have emotional issues that we
Mhm.
have to go through. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that separates, I think, art when it comes to erotic art
Mhm.
is not necessarily the bankable image. I mean, don't get me wrong, that helps. Pretty women, pretty men, good looking men and stuff like that. That all helps and feeds it gets the interest, stuff like that. But it's
Mhm.
the story and the heart that comes into it that I think really there's a great there are two of my favorite movies. One is Preaching to the Perverted,
Oh, I've never
and
seen. Yeah.
oh my god, you definitely got I miss shout
Okay.
out to Miss Kim Rubb. She's technical consultant on that movie. And then there's an older movie called Personal Services, which is based on a true
Okay.
story, which is directed by Terry Jones from Monty Python.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And it's a great movie about and these people, there are people in London who are really struggling and poor, and they decide to open up a brothel. And
Mhm.
it's a true story too.
Mhm.
And it shows like, sex can be kind of ugly, and that's what kind of makes it beautiful at the same
Yeah.
time. You know what I mean? It's like not everyone is like looks a certain way or acts a certain way and stuff like that. Like, the more real it is, the better it is. All right, so let's go back to words. All right,
Yeah.
let's go back
Yeah.
to words and sexuality and words. I saw a film called I've seen many times a Lars Van Trier film called Nymphomaniac.
Okay. I've
Okay,
heard of it. I haven't seen it.
I think it's a great movie.
Okay.
It's long though, but it really deals with sex addiction, and if you're going to watch a sex addiction movie, definitely Shame with Michael Fassbender is a great movie. But
Okay.
Nymphomaniac is, it's a movie that from Dutch filmmaker Lars van Trier, and they use the C word, cunt,
Mhm.
a lot, over and over again, and it's so. What is your opinion of that word?
I think it can be sexy
Okay.
in the right context. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, here's the wrong context. I mean, my my brother and sister got in a fight once and he called her a cunt and she didn't speak to him for 6 months. Okay? So like
Okay.
yeah, maybe not in that context, but I mean, I think like when it comes to dirty talk or like really getting verbal when you're having a sexual encounter, I think it can be a super sexy word.
Definitely. Okay. Yeah. I know a lot of women who, who've kind of used that and it's like get empowered by it. And
Yeah.
then it also becomes like a class thing. Some people think it's below their class or whatever to use
Mhm.
that word.
Yeah, yeah,
Just like profanity or anything like that. But
yeah.
it is what it is. It do you?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like you do you, right?
So do you with your job,
Mhm.
with the erotic blueprints and everything like that, do you teach couples?
I personally don't. I am not a certified coach yet.
Okay.
Um, so I don't I work as the executive assistant. I've got
Okay.
my hands in all kinds of things there, but I do not do any coaching or hands-on work with people.
Okay. And how did this get started? What like made you get involved in this emotionally? How did you get involved with this? Like where were you before you got involved in it, and where are you now, so to speak?
Yeah, so like I said, my first exposure to this world was 2019's Path to Passion. And as I said earlier, I had all these ideas about what this was going to be. And I walked in the door and I think there were about boy, I want to say like 500 people at that Path to Passion event that year.
Mhm.
And I walked in the door and there are people dancing. Like these people looked more alive than any other people I'd ever seen. And people fully expressed whatever that meant for them. I remember seeing one woman in like a Laura Ashley dress, and for people who are too young to know, like you might wear a Laura Ashley dress to church on Easter Sunday, right? And so, I mean, she had this beautiful floral dress on that you might see in church on Easter Sunday. And then there were the people in leather who were maybe a little more resonant with the kink blueprint. It didn't matter. It's like just people that were fully expressed no matter what that meant for them. And I knew by the end of my first day there that this was a community where people are just met exactly where they're at,
Yes.
um, which felt very safe to me.
Now, was
Um,
this in Colorado? I forget.
yeah, it was in Colorado.
Now, how would you think that I have I don't want to say love hate, that's not true. But Colorado is a very interesting state, and
Yeah,
culturally it's very interesting because, like, first of all, you have the military aspect with Colorado Springs and
yeah,
the very very religious aspect, but then you have something like Red Rock, you
yeah,
know where my very good friend Wendy, she is extremely sexually expressive, extremely into um you know LGBTQ rights, stuff like that, and very political when it comes to, say, like, women's rights, civil rights,
mhm,
legalization of marijuana, trans rights, and stuff like that.
yeah,
It almost seems it's heightened on almost both levels. Like
Mhm.
there you have one section that's like really adamant about their cause, then another section that's really adamant, which is like the opposite end of the spectrum, that's also
Yeah.
really adamant about their cause.
Mhm.
So how would you describe Colorado in your words?
I think you sort of addressed an important aspect of it, which is it depends on where you are. I mean, down by Colorado Springs, as you were saying, um, tends to be very evangelical. A lot of the evangelical Christian influence. Of course, they have the Air Force Academy there, the military, all like you said, all that stuff. And then exactly like you said, on the opposite end of the spectrum, just a couple hours away, you have a place like Boulder that is as laissez-faire and liberal as it gets, and really people feel very comfortable expressing who they are there.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so we really do kind of have that gamut in
definitely.
Colorado for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about your personal sexual expression, if you don't mind. What are you into?
Mm.
Well, let me back up. What without you don't have to go into detail or anything like that, but like what kind of turns you on? What does it for you?
Well, as I've really dived deeper into the erotic blueprints, I've been very surprised at some of the things that turn me on. Um, I found out, oh, maybe about 6 months ago that I was an energetic, which was really a great big surprise for me. Um, and so it surprised me because I have to be very frank here and say I almost had a little bit of disdain for the energetic type. The energetic type is really turned on by space and tease and anticipation. Um Something like eye gazing is something we really think of that really associates or corresponds to the energetic blueprint. And stuff like that, like tantra, eye gazing, just used to give me the willies. It just used to give me the willies. I'm like, oh my God, that's not for me. But I went to a spiritual event maybe a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago. And the facilitator was going to have all these 23 or 24 people there who we were all strangers. We had to do these various edgy activities. And the facilitator said, we're just going to start with the edgiest one, which is eye gazing. And I went, no, no, not the eye gazing. Oh my God. But what we had to do, we had to switch partners 3 times and eye gaze with a stranger for 3 minutes. And do you have any experience with like the whole eye gazing thing?
No, the only experience I have is really staring contests.
Okay, well, yeah, it's kind of like a spiritual staring contest. So, you would just stand about a foot apart away from this person, and it was recommended that we gaze into the left eye. And I'm just horrified when she announces this, right? I'm just like, holy shit. So, but what I found out, it was one of the most exquisitely pleasurable things I've ever done in my life. I mean, the next day after I eye gazed with all these strangers, my mom and I were driving to an art exhibit, and I said, "Boy, mom, I don't know if I should be driving. I'm so blissed out. I feel like I'm in an altered state right now." So that, I mean, that Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? I thought this gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'll never, ever, ever try it. And I tried it, and it was an blissful, pleasurable, huge turn on of an experience. Yeah,
Interesting.
go ahead.
So let's talk about the your, I guess, organization was involved with this Netflix series.
Yeah.
Please tell us about that, and what was your role in it?
Yeah, I mean, basically my role is I was just on team when all of a sudden, like, everybody in the world wanted to know who Jaya was based off of Sex, Love, and Goop. So Sex, Love, and Goop was released on Netflix on October 21st last fall. And it is season 2 of Gwyneth Paltrow's show, I guess. And Gwyneth Paltrow just wanted to make season 2 all about sex. So Jaya was brought in as one of the experts, and of course Jaya worked with a couple using the erotic blueprints, and then um I believe they had a sexological body worker. Um, oh gosh, what's this therapy called? It's like called family systems therapy or something. Anyways, they had a therapist who was an expert on that. Yeah, so it was just kind of this little mix of um, sex experts on the show.
Okay. So let's talk about uh let's say a couple are together. They love each other very much.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they kind of both feel they're in kind of a sexual rut.
Hmm.
What would you do? How would you or your organization help them?
Hmm. First step would be take the quiz. Take the erotic blueprint quiz. And I will offer a little caveat about the quiz. We have 2 versions. We have a free version, which is we'll just give you your primary blueprint. It's a 10-question quiz. And then we have an in-depth version that's $17 that I believe is like 22 questions. And it will give you a percentage breakdown of it's like your blueprint pie, like what percentage of each that you are. And I would say the first step is for each part of the couple, find out what your blueprint stack looks like. um and that's one way to get the conversation going. So I think that would be the threshold thing in our world, is just what blueprint are you? What blueprint is your spouse, you know?
Okay. Would you find that the certain blueprints get along better than other blueprints? Like, for example, Amanda was saying that I am central kinky and more of a central kinky shapeshifter type person.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? There are certain people who are more energetic, certain people who, or whatever you fall under. Are there certain kind of combinations that get along better than others, or what?
Well, I guess what I would say to that, one big, big, big thing we say a lot in my work world is we believe sexual incompatibility is a myth.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so um, the analogy Jaya uses a lot is if you were American and you fell in love with somebody who spoke French, would you just call it quits because you didn't speak French and they didn't speak American English? Like you would, like you're saying, you have a couple who loves each other, you would learn each other's language.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I wouldn't say there's necessarily any combinations that are better, worse, this, that, just that sexual incompatibility is a myth.
Okay. All right. Rapid fire recommendations. They don't have to be kink related or sex related at all, but they can be.
Okay.
All right. Recommend a film.
Oh, let me tell you my favorite love story.
Okay.
I don't tell a lot of people this because of shame, right? We talked about
Okay. Yeah, sure.
we touched on shame. There is a fantastic little indie film, and I forget the filmmaker's name. She's a woman and she cast herself in the lead role. And it's called Good Dick. And it is my all-time. Have you seen it? Good Dick?
No, no. Now I'm gonna though.
Oh, my absolute most favorite love story. Yeah.
And well, without giving too much away, what is the plot?
Yeah, no spoilers, but Good Dick is a love story about a woman who is an incest survivor. And the only way she is comfortable expressing erotically in the world is basically isolating in her apartment and masturbating to porn all day, every day.
Hmm. Okay.
So she has a favorite porn video shop that she frequents all the time. This is back in the days when you rented DVDs for stuff, I guess.
Remember
Um,
them?
yeah, yeah. So she
Those
goes,
days.
yeah, she frequents this porn shop, and one of the cashiers at the porn shop is a homeless guy who lives in his car, but he works at this shop, and he just becomes fascinated by her. And anyways, a love story ensues. And I just think it's very, very beautiful, very erotic movie.
Interesting. Okay. Recommend a song.
Mm. Okay, so if we're talking along the lines of eroticism,
We
I
don't have
like
like keep in mind it doesn't have to be.
I
It can
know,
be.
I know. But what I will say, I was just thinking about this today. I love songs that have a discernible orgasm in the song. Like, so you're a music lover, right? Like, have
Yeah.
you ever been have you ever noticed that you can tell where the orgasm it is in a
Yeah,
song?
definitely. Without that, when like it's a lot of times it comes out when in a recording, not a live version, but in a recording. Um, like it's usually right after the bridge, like when it breaks down and then the chorus comes right back up again, and you're like, yeah, the chorus. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Um, yeah,
yes, yeah.
and yeah, so yeah, definitely. There's a song by Pulp called Sunrise, which I think really works very well with the quiet, loud, loud, quiet type,
Mm,
thing where it comes
yeah.
in and it really there's this energy that comes through it where it becomes like this orgasmic sense where everything kind of works, the
Mm,
vocals, the guitars, the drums, the bass line, the keyboards, everything, all of it comes together and it all kind of comes in.
mhm.
So yeah.
So, yeah, I think a real good example of a song with an orgasm is that everybody knows is "You Can't Always Get What You Want" by the Stones.
Hell yeah. Oh my
Right?
god.
The children's choir is ascending that scale right after the bridge, just like you said, right after the bridge, and
Yeah.
they hit that high note, and then the drums go into double time, right? It's like, boom, there's the
Yeah,
orgasm
especially
song.
at the end where it's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, and it really,
Yeah.
like, it gets more upbeat, the rhythm gets stronger and stuff like that. Yeah, hell yeah. That is an incredible track. And that I have never heard a cover version of this song that could even touch the original. You know,
Really?
yeah, the
Yeah.
original is amazing. It's perfect.
Oh, it's awesome.
And it was done in a movie called The Big Chill.
Oh, you'll never forget it. Alex's funeral
Yeah,
procession
exactly, which is one of
in
my
The Big
favorite
Chill.
movies. One of
It's
my favorite
great
soundtracks as
movie.
well. One of my favorite soundtracks as
Oh,
well.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, recommend a book.
Oh my god, there's so many. Um, I will tell you a book that changed my life and shaped who I am is by Morris Berman. Morris Berman is my intellectual hero, and he wrote a book around 1980 called The Reenchantment of the World, and it
Interesting.
changed my life.
Interesting. I'll definitely check that out. Okay. Recommend art. Now, this could be an artist, a
Okay.
piece of art. It could be any kind of medium. It could be painting, drawing, sculpture, performance art,
Mm.
anything. Recommend any kind of art or artist.
I'm really fond of Laurie Anderson as far as
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she's just so phenomenal. And she and Lou Reed had one of the great love stories of
Hell
art.
yeah.
Oh,
Surprised
beautiful
there's not a
love
movie
story.
about it. There is this when I was a DJ, I used to be a DJ for the radio stations.
Mhm,
And it started out with college. And
mhm,
they gave I'm a huge fan of Velvet Underground and stuff like that.
mhm.
And Laurie Anderson has a song called "In Our Sleep," and it's a duet with Lou Reed.
Oh,
And
awesome.
it's the original. The single version is really short. It's only like 2.5 minutes, so 3 minutes
Mhm.
maybe,
Yeah.
something like that. And it is awesome. It is so good. If you could find, it's called "In Our Sleep."
Will.
It's Laurie Anderson with Lou Reed as a guest vocalist,
Oh,
and he just like kind of does the background chorus vocal type stuff, but
okay.
it is so good. And just we're talking about the sensual blueprint, it's
Yeah.
one of those things that kind of create this atmosphere, which is beautiful. That's why I'm a big fan of Roxy music. You know, I've been listening to a lot of Brian Ferry and Roxy music these days,
Mm.
and stuff like Avalon and Anything to Turn You On, and the cover version of I Fooled Around and Fell in Love.
Oh,
You know,
wow. Yeah.
there's there's this amazing kind of ambient energy that comes across in those songs that and that's what Laurie Anderson has really done with
Oh,
with that. She's incredibly creative, um, and also just great avant-garde sense of humor. I
oh,
think.
I remember seeing an interview with Laurie Anderson once, and she was talking about John Gage and
Oh yeah,
his avant-garde music, or John Cage, or I can't
John
remember
Cage. Yeah.
is it
Oh
John
God,
Cage?
yeah.
Yeah, John Cage. She was talking about John Cage, and she said something I'll never forget. She said, "John Cage makes me laugh, and I think I trust that more than anything."
Oh, definitely, and that's a beautiful thing. We were talking about humor in the
Yeah.
thing in the past in this interview. Um, I personally, that's why I love comedy and I love stand up
Mhm,
comedy. Um, I don't. Of course, you could always laugh at somebody. That's an easy way, but to
mhm.
laugh with somebody
Yeah.
is makes a complete. It makes all the difference. Okay, recommend a television show, and that could be streaming, could be the YouTube video, whatever. Recommend a show.
I gotta be honest, I don't have the attention span for TV, and I have not owned a TV or done any type of streaming service for probably 25 years.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Recommend a meal.
Oh, anything Ethiopian.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Anything Ethiopian. Yeah.
That's what's interesting about Colorado is that the diversity of food that comes across, just like Portland, and I live in New Jersey,
Mhm.
and there's almost every kind of food culture that you could think of, which is great. Like there was
Yeah.
a place in New Brunswick called Makeda's, which you order stuff and everybody shares everything, and
Oh, yeah, it's so great.
it's so
Yeah.
good. Okay, so we're winding stuff down. Courtney, how can people get in touch with you? How can people get in touch with your
Mhm.
organization? I'm talking Twitter, FetLife, Instagram, you name it, uh, websites. Go.
Yeah. Yeah, so in order to take the erotic blueprint quiz, you would go to don't forget the blueprintbreakthrough.com. That's our entry point there, the quiz. Um you can get Magpies, a Zoem anthology. It's on Amazon, the anthology of our open mic poets work. I'm at Instagram, or on Instagram at Words Are the Universe. That's me on Instagram.
Okay. And everybody can find me. I'm at yourkinkyfriends.com. I'm on Twitter at Nicholas Tanek. The whole crew's on Twitter at Friends Kinky. We're on FetLife at Your Kinky Friends. And we're on Instagram at Friends Kinky. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/YKF. We're going to have all these uncensored interviews, the stuff that we had to take off. We're going to put right on there at a
Awesome.
very, very low price. Extremely low price. We're doing it for the love. We're not doing it for the money. Trust me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just hit me up. And oh my God, please, Cortney, stay in the line after we're done. I won't waste your time because it's important. Never waste a kinky person's time. And yeah, it's getting late, my friends. My dom is calling me. Remember the cardinal
Okay.
rule, everybody. Remember the cardinal rule. Be cool, be kind, keep an open mind. Take care.